Here are more of the most epic deaths in history. Number 1. Galvarino. On November 8, 1557, a group of 100 Mapuche warriors are being escorted by Spanish conquistadors back to their camp as prisoners of war. The Mapuche have been fighting with these invaders for over a year now, desperately trying to defend their homeland. And though their bravery is unmatched, they're outclassed in both weapons and armor against these barbaric foreigners. Walking amongst the prisoners is a man named Galvarino. He and his fellow warriors have just been defeated in the Battle of Lagunias, and instead of simply being executed on the spot, he's being saved for a much more devious plan. But before we get into all the horrific things that happened to Galvarino and his fellow warriors, let's take some time to learn about today's sponsor, Call of War World War II. Call of War is a free-to-play, massive, multiplayer PvP strategy game set during World War II. If you love strategy board games like Risk or Axis and Allies, this game will seem like it was made just for you. In Call of War, you take control of a real country, build up your cities, train your units, and set out to conquer the world. You can do this through sheer military might, or you can try the diplomatic route and build powerful alliances to quickly wipe out weaker players. How you play is completely up to you, and with maps that support up to 100 real players, the battles will be intense. One of the coolest things about Call of War is that all the units move in real time, which raises the stakes for every decision you make, as one wrong move could have severe consequences. For example, you know that ally you thought was going to watch your back while you sent all your troops to go attack your neighbor? Yeah, he just invaded you. Sorry. Call of War features over 120 historically accurate units, ranging from infantry to aircraft, and you can customize your army to fit your playstyle perfectly. So if this all sounds cool, you can play Call of War completely for free on PC or mobile by using the link in the description below. Doing that gets you an exclusive gift of 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. The special offer is only available for 30 days, so don't wait. See, the leader of the conquistadors in Chile, the governor Garcia Hurtado de Mendoza, is tired of dealing with these natives who keep attacking them, and he comes up with a solution that hopefully will bring an end to this constant harassment. The Spaniards and their prisoners arrive at the camp, and Governor Mendoza orders his men to mutilate each of the Mapuche warriors. Many are to have their noses and right hands cut off, but more skilled warriors like Galvarino will instead have both of their hands chopped off to make sure they can never fight again. The conquistadors begin to execute this brutal punishment, and the warriors cry out in pain as their noses and hands are savagely cut off. When it's his turn, Galvarino calmly places his hand on the chopping block. Without hesitation, a man wielding a hatchet severs Galvarino's right hand at the wrist, leaving just a bleeding stump. He makes no sound, and showing no emotion, he puts his left hand onto the chopping block, which the Spaniard also chops off without hesitation. Galvarino then rests his head on the chopping block and demands that they kill him to finish the job, but this was not what Mendoza wanted. See, the mutilation was not meant to kill the Mapuche. Instead, he wanted to send a message to the tribe. That message being, anyone who dared to stand in their way will meet a similar gruesome fate. The governor releases the now disfigured warriors, and they return home with instructions to give this warning to their fellow natives to never fight the Spaniards again, or this will be your inevitable future. But when Galvarino returns home, he does not tell the Mapuche to stop resisting, and instead holds his stumps up in the air and shouts, "The damage they have done since they entered our realm, and what they've done to me, is what they will continue to do if we're not diligent in destroying these injurious people." He demands that the Mapuche must do everything they can to fight these invaders and defend their homeland. His speech is so rousing that he's promoted to a war chief and is placed in charge of the counterattack against the Spanish. This is a pretty sick promotion, but remember, he doesn't have his hands anymore, so doing anything more than strategy might be a little challenging. But Galvarino is not content to simply lead from behind. He wants revenge, so he has knives lashed to the stumps of his mutilated wrists, becoming a human weapon, and he'll lead from the front. So on the dawn of November 30th, Galvarino and a large group of Mapuche warriors stage an ambush on the camp of Governor Mendoza. Knowing the Spaniards had horses and cannons, the plan was to start and end the battle quickly before the invaders could organize themselves. But something goes wrong. A miscommunication, and some of the warriors miss their cue and begin charging too early. Galvarino raised his knifed stub, yelling, "Nobody is allowed to flee but to die, because you died defending your mother country." He then rushes ahead to the front of the charge to lead his men into battle. The Mapuche rush in, and Galvarino is aiming for Governor Mendoza's head. On his rampage through the camp, he cuts down the general second in command with his knives. But as bravely as they fought, the Mapuche were still armed with simple clubs and spears. Though the Spaniards were caught off guard by the initial attack, it did not take long for them to ready their cannons. Explosions soon sent shockwaves through the battlefield, and a hole is punched through the Mapuche offensive. Their mounted cavalry storm in, and the battle quickly turns into a slaughter. By noon, 3,000 Mapuche warriors are slain, and 800 more are captured, including Galvarino. He's brought to Governor Mendoza for a second time, and a Spanish aide near him, seeing his knifed stumps, begins to request mercy for him. He asks Galvarino if he'd like to join them and fight alongside the Spanish forces. To which he replies, "I would rather die than live like you, and I'm only sorry that my death will keep me from tearing you to pieces with my teeth." Okay, never mind. The 800 captured men are all executed, mostly by hanging, but reportedly in some stories, Galvarino was given a more brutal punishment and fed to the governor's dogs, who tore him apart alive. Number 2. Constantine XI. It's the mid-15th century, and things are not looking too great for Constantine XI. Though he's technically an emperor, he has no empire left to rule. All that's left of the once mighty Eastern Roman Empire is a single city, Constantinople. The land surrounding his city, all once Roman territory, is now controlled by the more powerful Ottoman Empire, and Constantinople is a mere tribute state that pays a heavy tax to the Ottoman Sultan for a right to even exist. This in itself might not have been that big a deal. Sure, there wasn't really an empire anymore, but hey, at least the Romans still exist, and maybe Constantine would have been content ruling just his little city for the rest of his life. But there was one major problem. See, according to Islamic prophecy, a great Muslim ruler will one day conquer the legendary city of Constantinople, and because of this quote-unquote fun fact, a lot of Muslim rulers have tried to take the city for themselves over the years. So far, they've all failed to do so, but in 1451, a young sultan named Mehmed II takes the throne of the Ottoman Empire, and the only thing he wants is to become this legendary ruler of prophecy and be the one who finally conquers Constantinople. Now, Constantine is no idiot, and when he sees Mehmed constructing a huge fortress right across the Bosphorus Strait, he knows something is coming, and he desperately starts trying everything he can think of to get someone to help him. He tries to marry a bunch of princesses from various countries in Europe to create allies, but nobody wants to marry him. He goes to the Pope and says he'll merge the Eastern Orthodox Church back into the Catholic Church to try to convince the Pope to send Catholic nations to help him. But this just pisses everybody off in Constantinople, so that didn't work. He hits up his fellow Christian superpowers like Genoa and Venice for help. He even tries to bargain with Mehmed himself to just let him keep the city, but there is no amount of money in the world that can get him to change his mind. After all his efforts, just a handful of ships and soldiers are sent from Europe to help, and Constantine is left to defend what's left of the Roman Empire against the Ottomans all alone. Now, as fortune would have it, around this time, a Hungarian cannon expert named Orban hears that Constantine is in this desperate situation, and he goes and tells him that he can make some weapons for him that would help him fight off any invader. Specifically, he has a special, never-before-seen mega cannon that is so powerful it can turn the tide of any battle. Constantine is super excited. Finally, his prayers are being answered, but he's crushed when he hears the price that Orban wants for his services, and he just doesn't have enough money to pay him. He tries to negotiate and offer what little money he has, but Orban refuses to deal and walks away. So with a tiny army of just 7,000 men, Constantine begins preparations for the inevitable Ottoman siege. He reinforces the great Theodosian walls that have withstood foreign invasions for centuries and strings a giant chain across the Golden Horn to prevent ships from attacking the city from the water. Some people think he's a crazy doomsday prepper, but Constantine is soon proven right at the end of 1452, when a horde of Ottoman soldiers begins setting up camp around Constantinople. Giant catapults and trebuchets are wheeled onto the field, along with something the Romans had never seen before. Wait, what the heck is that thing? You gotta be f***ing kidding me. See, Orban couldn't make a deal with Constantine, but with Mehmed, well, no price was too steep if it helped him achieve his dream of becoming the ruler of prophecy. So Orban's mega cannon called the Basilic was wheeled out and aimed directly at the front gates. Constantine cannot believe the size of this thing. It's 24 feet long and its cannonballs are the size of boulders. Finally, on April 6, after months of preparation, Mehmed begins his siege. It's 100,000 Ottoman soldiers versus just 7,000 men who are to defend Constantinople. Cannons ring out and punch holes into the great walls surrounding the city, and arrows rain down on Constantine and his men. On April 11th, Orban's mega cannon is fired, and the explosion is so large it kills the Ottoman soldiers operating it instantly. The 1,200-pound cannonball leaves a giant crater in Roman defenses. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the Romans fight bravely and against all odds are able to repel the Ottoman forces who get into the city twice. Every night, Roman men, women, and children desperately race to patch holes in the Great Walls before morning. Everyone's trying to chip in and save all that's left of their once great society. A small fleet of ships from Europe make it past the Ottoman blockade and bring supplies into the city, and the Romans begin to think, hey, maybe we got a shot at winning this. But suddenly, a string of mysterious, almost biblical bad omens begin to occur, which slowly eat away at the hopes and dreams of everyone within the city walls. First, on the night of April 22nd, a lunar eclipse blocks out the moon. Local prophecy had stated that the city would fall when the moon lost its light, and the sight of this freaks the citizens out. That alone would be bad enough, but the omens didn't stop there. Next, in early May, a strange mist rises from the ground around the sacred Hagia Sophia Cathedral. The citizens take this as the Holy Spirit that had once protected them, leaving them to fend for themselves. The Romans attempt to hold a religious procession to call up the Virgin Mary to save them, but as they were walking, the painting of Mary being carried in the streets falls out of the priest's hands and onto the ground. The crowd gasps as even the Mother Mary has forsaken them. And perhaps the most ominous sign happens a few days later when fire is seen dancing in the sky above the Hagia Sophia, striking the chapel, signaling their impending doom. This fire was most likely a natural phenomenon called St. Elmo's fire, but they didn't know that, and to the average citizen, it just seemed like God had abandoned them and they were all doomed. These bad omens weighed on no one's mind more heavily than Constantine, who did his best to convince his citizens that these were in fact good omens, but deep down he was troubled that these truly were signs from the divine that his empire was at its end. Regardless, he and his men continued to fight on, but by May 28th, the once impenetrable walls defending the legendary city had been reduced to a giant pile of rubble, and it became clear that night that the Ottomans would stage an all-out assault the following day. Many of his advisors urged Constantine to flee the city and fight another day, but he refuses and instead conducts a church service, the final Christian service ever held within the Hagia Sophia. He finishes the night with a speech recounting the greatness of the Roman Empire and all of the heroes who have come before them. He reminds his soldiers of their ancestors and their Roman heritage and implores every man to fight to the end to defend this history. The speech steels his men, and not one abandons his post. The next day, as expected, the Ottomans storm the city with their entire force and quickly breach the walls. The Romans and their allies fight bravely, but it soon becomes clear that the day is lost. Ottoman flags are flown atop the ruined walls, and Constantine can do nothing but watch the chaos unfold in front of him. The empire of Romulus and Remus, of Augustus, of Constantine the Great, and Justinian will all end today. His advisors again beg Constantine to flee. The ships are ready, and many others are already boarding and leaving for Europe, but he refuses. The city is fallen, yet I am still alive, he laments as he watches more Ottoman soldiers pour into his city. He then removes his crown and royal markings and rushes headfirst into battle as a nameless Roman soldier. He is never seen again. Number 3. Sergeant Gander. In 1939, a black Newfoundland pup named Pal is brought home by a local family in Newfoundland, Canada. He's a playful dog with lots of energy. He grows to be so big that the family's children often ride him or have him pull them around on sleds. He's a good boy, but his large size is quickly becoming an issue. And one day, while playing with some neighborhood kids, Pal accidentally scratches the face of one of the children. Pal was too much dog for the family, and they decided instead of putting him down, to donate him to the 1st Battalion of the Royal Rifles of Canada that were stationed nearby in Gander, Newfoundland to be their mascot. When Pal arrives, he's initially a little scared, but the men instantly fall in love with him and rename him Gander after the location of the base they're stationed at. When not on duty, the soldiers would play with him, and now Gander can be as rough as he wants to be. He eats together with them, drinks beer with them, and sleeps with them in the bunks. They even promoted him to sergeant and gave him stripes to match that get attached to his collar. At last, Gander has finally found his family and his home. But in October of 1941, the British forces are spread too thin across Europe and needed help defending their colonies in Asia. The Royal Rifles are deployed to Hong Kong to defend it against a Japanese attack. Not wanting to leave Gander all alone, the men bring him with them across the Pacific. For the first 3 weeks, life isn't much different in Hong Kong than it was back home. Just a few routine patrols here and there, but on December 8th, the day after the Pearl Harbor attack, the Japanese begin their assault on the European colonies in Asia. The combined British and Indian forces massively underestimate the Japanese fighting capabilities, and in a few short days, their entire fighting force is pushed off of mainland China and onto Hong Kong itself. The Royal Rifles are stationed on Hong Kong to defend the Lai Mun Gap, which is the part of the island that is closest to mainland China, and when thousands of Japanese soldiers begin pouring onto the island, the Royal Rifles find themselves under heavy fire as the first line of defense. The fighting is intense, but throughout it all, Gander is right there on the front line fighting with his fellow Canadians. Any Japanese soldier who gets too close is tackled by what they can only describe as a black monster. The Japanese had never seen a dog this big and have absolutely no idea what it is. As the Canadians send rounds at the invaders from their bunkers, they catch glimpses of Gander chasing Japanese soldiers away, barking and biting at their heels. On December 19th, the battle is raging well into the night, and a group of injured Canadian soldiers are waiting to be taken off the battlefield when a grenade suddenly lands right in front of them. The men try to scramble away, but it's no good. They're all too injured to move, and they can do nothing but watch the grenade and wait for their inevitable doom. But out of nowhere, Gander dashes in, picks up the grenade in his mouth, and takes off toward the Japanese line. The men's relief quickly turns to horror when they realize what has just happened. They helplessly stare out into the darkness, and a few short seconds later, they hear an explosion a short distance in front of them. Gander had saved their lives at the cost of his own. The Canadian forces surrender to the Japanese on Christmas Day, and many of the soldiers are taken to prison camps where they're interrogated about the black demon they had trained to fight with them on the battlefield. In 2000, Gander's bravery was finally recognized by the United Kingdom when he was posthumously awarded the Dickin Award, the animal equivalent to the Victoria Cross. Thanks again to Call of War for helping to make this video. Use the link in the description below and get an exclusive gift of 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. Offers only available for 30 days, so what are you waiting for? Choose your country and fight your way to victory!